Good afternoon and welcome to Power Hour on River Radio with me, Emma Jane Taylor. Power Hour is every Wednesday at 1 o'clock and it is a dedicated 60 minutes talking about the many difficult subjects that people are too afraid to talk about, but of course many still want to know about. We support the many people struggling in silence by giving a voice to the real problems affecting real lives. Today's Power Hour is opening up the conversation on divorce, and we're going to open up lots of conversation around this difficult subject and hopefully answer lots of questions for you in the process. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce you to my guests today, Sara Davison and Karen Kipping. Good afternoon, ladies. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today. Let's come to you, Sara. Great to have you with me today. And let's hear a little bit about you and the work that you're doing, because you're super busy right now, aren't you?
Yes, well, I'm best known as the divorce coach, and I help people going through any kind of separation, heartbreak, or divorce. I obviously offer coaching one-to-one. I run retreats. I'm actually now having to run virtual retreats. So I'm in the middle of running my Heartbreak to Happiness virtual retreat as well. And yeah, really just helping people to cope better with that and running my podcast too. Yeah, it's been busy times. I mean, the pandemic has definitely increased in the number of phone calls I'm getting. So yeah, it's nice to be able to offer some support and help.
Yeah, and while we're on that, let's go to one of the first news subjects, because the coronavirus pandemic is creating an enormous strain on relationships, and Advice Charity has warned, with family lawyers predicting a post-lockdown divorce boom. I mean, you must be seeing this in its glory right now.
Yes, I mean, right from the get-go of the first lockdown, there's been an increase in people really struggling, because obviously if your relationship had cracks before, then being forced to spend time within four walls with your partner is going to accentuate that. So what we're finding is that, you know, if you had a great relationship before, then that quality time together may have been something that you've been craving and your relationship might be thriving. But if there were issues that maybe you were able to cope with because you were out in the morning, maybe doing the school run or going to work, and then maybe coming together for dinner, but that was about it during the day, those differences, those issues could really not be forefront of your lives. Whereas when you take all that away, the daily routines, you're really having to face it. And those little things that maybe just slightly irritated you before become a lot bigger. And if there were serious issues within the relationship, then obviously those cracks are going to start to widen. So that's, I think, why we're seeing this increase. And Stewart's Law released some figures quite recently to say that the divorce rate, the number of inquiries have gone up by 122% in the last 6 months of 2019 versus 2018. So I know the family law firms are seeing an increase. And I'm sure now when people are free to move out, to move home, to separate, we're going to see all those people that stayed because of lockdown now coming out and separating, which is sad, because I think some of those relationships would have lasted the test of time if, you know, normal routines were able to happen. But unfortunately, this has changed that, and the repercussions are going to be big.
Okay, so a big conversation which will continue as the hour goes on. Thank you very much. It's great to have you here with me, Sara. Good afternoon, Karen. Great to have you with me here as well. Let's find out a little bit about you.
Hi, Emma Jane. So I'm Karen. I am a divorce and separation coach, and I specialise in supporting people that are thinking about or coming out of or trying to recover from abusive and controlling relationships. So they can be any of those stages, and when you are trying to separate from somebody who behaves in that way, it can be a really difficult process, very emotionally draining, very confusing. So they need a lot of support. So yeah, like Sara, since March last year, my referrals have really increased quite significantly, and I am getting lots of worried parents, people, you know, asking for help and advice because they're really in a real kind of mess and struggling with quite difficult situations. But yeah, it's good to be able to help. And I just, like Sara, I help people one-to-one. And I have a private Facebook group where people can get some peer support so they know that they're not on their own. And I just launched my book, which shares some of those tips and strategies that will help them get through that process and come out the other side.
What's your book called, Karen?
So it's called Recognition to Recovery, How to Leave Your Abusive Ex Behind for Good. And it's got bite-sized strategies that you can use that will really help you practically and emotionally get stronger through it and come out the other side thriving.
Okay, so, you know, in the news at the moment, Karen, they're suggesting that separated couples exploiting the COVID-19 lockdown to stop the ex-partner from seeing their child could now face court action. I mean, you know, difficult situations all around. Do you see this in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, definitely in the first lockdown particularly, I saw that. I was getting calls from parents worried about sending their children to the other parent because they weren't adhering to the lockdown rules, and they were worried about the child, you know, picking up the COVID infection. I was also hearing about parents that were keeping the child and using COVID as an excuse to keep them for longer. So they weren't adhering to the child arrangement orders that were in place, etc. So there was a lot of worry around the whole COVID situation, and that hasn't gone away really. You know, we are still in these really difficult and challenging times, and then you throw divorce and separation into the mix as well, and yeah, it's really challenging times for parents.
But also, how awful that people are using COVID to exploit their children and stop another partner from seeing their child in the process. You know, the heart of the problem and the difficulties shouldn't be, they shouldn't be using the children as bait as such, you know. And I guess this is a conversation, let's take this conversation on now, both of you, you know, keeping that child engaged with both parents is really important, right? Regardless of the situation. What is it and why is it, do you guys think, let's start with you, Sara, why is it that some parents just feel that they want to use the child as the pawn in their fight with that battle with the ex-partner?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to this, to be honest, and I think we've got to be careful. I mean, there are definitely people out there, men and women, that will use the children against their ex-partner, and that happens, and that's not right for the child, because, you know, as long as the other parent is safe to be with, then that should be something that is good for the child. And, you know, to know both parents, experience both homes and develop those relationships and those bonds is really important. So to maintain that is key. I think some people going through a divorce separation, you know, feel that they, you know, they never signed up to not having their kids with them. So, for example, you know, I've got a client at the moment and she is doing that, which is not good, and it's not right for the child, and it's not good behavior. Her reasoning for it is not to be manipulative. It's really that she just is very terrified of not having her child around her. So she's heartbroken. Her ex had an affair. He went off. He's with somebody else. And the mother is like, well, I never signed up to not having my kid 50% of the time with me. So it's an emotional response to a very difficult situation. I'm not saying it's right. It's not. But sometimes that parent needs a bit of work to understand what's best for the child, and that they have to put the child first. Now, that's one side of it, where people can either be manipulative or just in so much pain that they're really struggling with that. The other side, and I'm sure Karen's seen this a lot during lockdown as well, is that the other side, if the relationship hasn't been healthy, for example, and you're dealing with someone who's a bit difficult, the other side may not be adhering maybe to lockdown rules. So they're having people over, they're going out, they're doing things they shouldn't do, which is therefore, in, you know, sometimes people might think, well, that's putting my child at risk, and then ultimately them at risk. So there might be other issues involved, you know, so it's rarely just what you see on the surface, and it can be manipulative, but it isn't always manipulative. And remember that during lockdown, domestic abuse rates have risen. So if you do have a problem, or there is a known issue with the other side and your child's going there, those issues could be escalating at home. So, there's so many reasons why this happens. And, it's not always manipulative. That's something I think is important to say.
So it's not always straightforward. It's not black and white. There is a lot of lots of things to consider in these conversations. But if we go back to an emotional parent, whether it be the mother or the father who didn't sign up, can't quite get their head around the fact that their child isn't going to be with them 100% of the time, what advice would you give to that parent, male or female, regardless of COVID, because I'm sure COVID has accentuated all these difficulties, but it was there anyway before. So what advice would you give to a parent, Sara, who just is struggling at the moment with that?
I think it's really talking through the issues and exploring their reasons why, getting them to get more clarity on why they're behaving like that. Because quite often when you've had those discussions and parents think, well, yeah, I can see that I am doing that. Sometimes they don't even realize they're in so much pain. They're not consciously aware of the behavior. And they're sort of maybe focused myopically on an argument or something that's happened and are kind of hiding behind that. But when you break it down with them, and then the light shines on the fact that actually, this isn't good for the child. And as parents, usually we tend to do more for our children than we will for ourselves. So if you can shift the focus away from it being unfair on that parent not having to see the child for that time because of the other parent's actions, if you can shift the focus to it's actually all about the child, and they're going to thrive, they're going to be much more balanced, they're going to be happier in the long run if they get that relationship with both sides. And quite often that's what it takes. There's also things you can do, and actually, in a healthy relationship where you're co-parenting, you can, it takes work on both sides. Both sides have to have some appreciation of this, and there's things the other party can do rather than go to war and say, this is an argument and you're not giving me the child. You could start sort of saying, okay, well, I'm going to have them one night a week or 2 nights a week, and then we're going to build up slowly so the other parent gets time to adjust. Potentially, that can work. Showing a bit of kindness, maybe allowing that parent a phone call or a FaceTime just to reassure them, can actually be a nice way, if you've got a healthy relationship, to demonstrate the child's fine. As soon as the parent recognizes that, they can relax. So in some cases that can be an effective strategy too.
And Karen, of course, not everyone's going to have a healthy relationship. So, divorce, there's a reason people have divorced, and, not everybody can do it in a kind way. Not everyone can do it in a safe, balanced way for them or their child. And people have come at loggerheads to these. And of course, that fight continues for the child. But let's just focus on this just for a couple more minutes. Those parents that are engaged in a battle, an aggressive battle, what would your advice be for them as also parents?
Well, like Sara said, you have to keep it child focused. You have to think about what is best for the child at all times. It should really be about what's best for them. It shouldn't be about what you want or what your ex wants. It's about what is best for that child, but also what is safe for that child too, and what is safe for the parent that has been abused. Very often when people go through a divorce, professionals can assume that everything is kind of okay now that they've separated, and that leaving is the solution, and that abusive behaviour is going to stop. But quite often it does carry on, and post-separation abuse is so prevalent that it is actually being incorporated within the new domestic abuse bill that is coming in, because we are very aware now that leaving doesn't mean that abusive behaviour stops. And very often that conflict around child contact continues, that coercive and controlling behaviour when it comes to communication with the ex-partner, that continues as well. So it's really important that if that is your situation, that you get advice from professionals that really understand those tactics and how to respond, that you get support, and that you learn some good strategies that will help you, so that you can try and minimize the impact of your abusive ex's behavior. Very often their behavior isn't going to change, it's not going to stop, but what you can do is you can take some of that control back. You can shift your focus back towards you and try and move forwards. So that's really important. And it can be a long drawn out process as well. So you just have to take it one step at a time, deal with one issue at a time, and try and stop yourself from snowballing, because you can get locked in that, oh, well, what if he does this? What if she does that? And, and it just becomes very overwhelming very quickly. So you have to kind of bring it back to now and just take it one step at a time and get as much support around you as you can.
Very difficult. I have seen couples who are so angry with each other, they don't consider the child, and regardless of the advice that they're getting from lawyers, therapists, they still can't put the child first. And my thought with this is, that child is going to be essentially quite damaged, and it will create long terms later on in life with relationships with the parents. And I've seen that as well with the work that I do, and I'm sure you guys have seen that as well. This isn't just about the now. This is about building strength and relationships that are healthy for the child, so that as the child goes on in life, that they can be strong, secure, safe, emotionally sound. And by stripping that away with the arguments, takes so much away from the child later on in life, doesn't it, Sara?
Yeah, it can, and that's the thing. I mean, it can be very difficult. I think if the arguments are played out in front of the children are involved. I've had clients come to me for first sessions who have been having arguments with the children in the rooms, discussing the ins and outs of the divorce and who's done what. They don't need to know those details. That's really important. So, but again, there's always two sides to this, Emma Jane. There's also the side where, even if you want to be amicable with your ex and you are divorcing what I call a difficult person, like, somebody that's got real, who has been abusive, who has abusive personality traits, even if you want to be friendly and do the right thing and put your child first, sometimes, you cannot have that amicable divorce because they are hell-bent on destroying you, crushing you, making things as difficult as possible. So I think in those cases, Karen and I both see a lot of those. It's about, doing your best, doing the right thing. Obviously, still, you don't go into the details with the child, but it is harder than, right, I've just got to do the right thing by the child, because you're in the middle of a battle, and whichever way you move, you're going to be criticised or blamed. So, that's a very difficult line, and not one necessarily that the family courts even understand, because there's no training for domestic abuse that's compulsory in the family courts. And actually, that was an amendment to the domestic abuse bill that was rejected this month by the Tory party unanimously, that they would not agree to having compulsory domestic abuse training for judges, which sounds shocking, but and it is. So actually, you're going up in front of judges and the lawyers and the barristers. They don't need to have any training in domestic abuse. So quite often they do say it's high conflict between both the parents and put equal weighting on it. And that can be extremely difficult for victims of abuse, because they're just not understood. And, it is difficult to understand domestic abuse unless you've been through it. All of us here know that, domestic abuse and what the impact it can have, and how people look at you and go, I was listening to something this morning on the radio where people were talking about their abuse, and other people were phoning in saying, well, why didn't you just leave? And there's such a stigma still around it, and two, a disbelief that people, why did they stay? Why don't they just get out? And so there's so much that isn't known. And if you think that the people who are making the decisions in the family courts don't know that either, it's a very difficult scenario. So, yeah, I mean, I think it always has to be balanced. It's a very difficult situation.
Yeah, and I've been talking about this a lot on Twitter around the subject of child sex abuse, because I really feel if the legal system, the prosecution systems took much more of the necessary time to understand the complexities around this for this instance, the parents, then the representation would be much fairer and much more constructive. So, why there isn't any kind of process where the legal systems and authorities have to really get behind understanding this is beyond me in all these situations, right? Domestic abuse, child abuse, all the things that have come up, because things like trauma bonding is a thing, and it's not understood, and unless you've been abused you will never really understand this. Okay, in fact, I would go further to say you won't understand trauma bonding unless you've been abused. It's a very complex relationship for so many people, survivors, and it doesn't mean that they like how they've been treated. It doesn't mean that they like their abuser. The bonding's huge. So, you know, things like that need to be considered in the legal systems, and they just aren't. So, you know, I hope you guys keep on the government about this, because, you know, certainly I feel from all angles of abuse, this is something that needs to be better considered. And it isn't. Okay, look, if you've just tuned in, I'm Emma Jane Taylor. This is Power Hour on River Radio. I'm with Karen Kipping and Sara Davison today, talking about divorce. If you're listening to today's show thinking, oh, I'd like to join the panel and be a guest expert, or you have a story to share with me, then please do get in touch. I would love to hear from you. My email is ej@river.radio. Okay, so back to today's show. Now, the number of couples getting divorced in England and Wales surged by almost a fifth in 2019 to the highest level in 5 years. Now, you know, they also say that there were also 822 same-sex divorces, nearly twice the number of 2018. Why is this? I mean, this is pre-COVID, I would say, right? Karen?
I think, well, pre-COVID, yeah. I'm just trying to think whether it is an increase or whether it is people feeling more empowered to make the decisions that they've not been able to make before. You know, especially during COVID, people have really kind of reevaluated things, you know, reevaluated their lives, where they are, thinking, do I still want to be in the same relationship 10 years from now, even 5 years from now, even 1 year from now? And for some people, it's given them the courage to take that first step that they maybe haven't wanted to take before. We live in a very different society now than we used to years ago, than our parents used to, very different mindset. You know, a few years ago in that generation, that older generation, once you got married, that was it, you were committed and you stayed together for life no matter what. But that's not really the same situation with the younger generation, definitely. And so, yeah, maybe people are just feeling more confident about taking those steps and not accepting, you know, a relationship that isn't fulfilling, that isn't giving them happiness. You know, one of my mantras that I stand by is life is too short to be unhappy. And I think it is. You know, when I came out of my divorce, it was really difficult. It was a really difficult time for a few years. But as I always say to my clients, you just have to grit your teeth and get through it. You know, remember the reason why you were doing this. I am not here to promote divorce. I'm not here to tell people to separate, that is, you know, the right solution. It has to be their choice. It's their life. But if they are really unhappy, if they are really sure that this relationship isn't working, you know, particularly if it is abusive, you know, then they have options. They have options. They don't have to stay with that person. They can separate. They can come out the other side and they can live the life that they've wanted to live. You know, they can find happiness again.
Well, when you were talking then, it made me just think of the trial separations. Sara, you know, I know lots of people who want a trial separation, but their partner won't agree to this because they believe that that will lead naturally onto divorce. But they also won't agree to therapy, and they won't agree to engaging in any kind of support. So you're kind of lost. I mean, you know, again, I'm sure this is something you come up against a lot with your work, but trial separations, are they a good thing? Should they be more considered?
Yeah, I think sometimes having a break from each other, especially after COVID, can help you reevaluate the situation, because, you know, divorce is known as the second most traumatic life experience we go through after death of a loved one. You go through the same grieving process, the same 5 stages of grief. You know, it is a very traumatic thing to go through. It's not something to rush into. It's not something to think, oh, well, if I get out of this, everything's going to be better. Sometimes, you know, there's a lot of adjustment that needs to take place. And I think, you know, given where we are right now with the fact that there is, you know, divorce is hard enough, but then you put on top of that all the anxiety, the pressure, the stress from COVID, the pandemic, you know, losing loved ones during the pandemic, you know, the fear of that, the fear that we all live with of, are we going to get it and what's going to happen, financial challenges. I mean, all those things add so much more pressure to what was already a difficult situation if your relationship's on the rocks. So I think, you know, as things get back to normal, don't rush into things. Don't say, right, I'm rushing to the divorce courts to get out of this relationship. Because, you know, it's quite normal for things to be uber stressful right now because we're living in a very high stress time. So I think it's going to take a bit of time for that stress to die down. Obviously, the vaccinations are rolling out now. Things are looking better in the UK, touch wood. So with that, hopefully, we will be able to reduce some of that stress and maybe clear some of that fogginess that's maybe making us make rash decisions. And I think, you know, I think you do have to work at relationships. You know, when people come to me saying, should I stay, should I go? I always explain to them that, you know, maybe it's a good chance now to commit for the next 12 weeks to doing everything you can to save that relationship, improving the communication, working out what you love about it, not just focusing on what you don't like about the relationship. Because once your mind's set and noticing all the negatives, you're going to see more. So, you know, finding out what are the things that you still enjoy and have those to mind as well. And then both committing, if you can, to step up and change some of the things that your partner isn't happy with or you're not happy with, and working as a team. And what that period of 12 weeks gives you is more clarity. And at the end of that, you'll know whether those changes that you've made are sustainable, because maybe they're not. I mean, I know when I went through my breakup, I tried to do certain things, like my ex said he wanted dinner on the table at a certain time and he wanted this, he wanted that. And I asked for a couple of things, and, you know, we tried to make it work for a little bit, you know, during the marriage. And, you know, those things weren't sustainable. They just weren't, you know, it just didn't happen. So at the end of that, you'll come to a realization whether it's possible or not. And clarity will give you more power. So if you're not sure, then, you know, do your best to save it, work on it, try different things, because leaving with regrets is a difficult thing, because you'll always look back thinking, oh, maybe if I'd done this or if I'd done that. Especially if you've got kids, it's about ringing out all the options, trying your best, so that at the end of it, you say, look, I did my best. My partner maybe did or didn't step up. And sometimes if they won't step up, like you said, Emma Jane, about going to therapy, sometimes if you step up and start implementing some of the changes that, you know, they would want to see, then sometimes that encourages them to step up too. So they don't necessarily have to commit with you at the beginning, and see what happens, but you will have more clarity at the end of that 12 weeks, and which will help you make a better decision for you and the family.
And Sara, you do the work that you do. Also, you do retreats, don't you? Divorce retreats. Tell us about these, and how can they, because you're not saying come on this retreat, let's get you divorced. You're going, let's come on this retreat, let's see if we can work through the process of the breakdown of your marriage and move the process on so you can go to divorce. Or maybe there's other ways to look at it, like you've just said. So how does the retreat work?
So, I mean, I'm excited to be running another live retreat, hopefully in September, October time this year. But at the moment, I'm doing them virtually. And they're really designed, there's 6 live webinars, and they combine with a video program I've got. So you've got all the tools and techniques on a video program and a workbook, but then you get that contact with me. And you also get to meet other people going through similar situations to you. So we're all on Zoom meetings, so everyone's on video, and you get that extra support group, which is invaluable. I can't tell you how much that of a difference that makes, because people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, some people at the beginning of their breakup. I'm running a retreat at the moment, and we're 2 sessions in. One lady has just been left by her partner. It's not the first time he's left, but he's left now, and it's 2 weeks in to him leaving and it being done. And she's obviously in the early stages. And then I have other people who have been separated for a couple of years, if not more, who are still stuck. And the tools in the program is designed to show that, you know, you can take control back. It's not the end of your life. There is a life after divorce, but there's a healing process you go through. And by explaining the different stages you go through and empowering yourself with the different tools and techniques to dial down those negative controlling emotions, or, you know, look at things in a different way. I mean, often we keep ourselves stuck with our unconscious behaviors. So, for example, I mean, last night someone was saying to me, Sara, I'm still in love with him, but he's treated me so badly for so long. But I'm still in love with him. How can I still love him? I'm an idiot. My friends and family are telling me I'm an idiot. And the challenge is we fall in love at the beginning of the relationship with who we think they are. So we have this romantic, lovely vision of this person that we fall in love with, and we hook into that. And then afterwards, their behavior may change. And the reality is sometimes they were never that person we fell in love with. Sometimes it was a smokescreen. Sometimes they were that person for a period of time, but they're not anymore. And so the challenge is that there's a conflict between who they actually are and who we're in love with. And it's about that realization that potentially there's two different people there. And that's how we unhook ourselves. When you start to get those realizations that actually the person I'm in love with doesn't exist, maybe they never did, or maybe they just don't exist anymore, that enables you to unhook and start to move forward. So there's tools and techniques like that that we discuss and dive into to help you, feel better and get stronger and start to plan that life ahead. Because quite often it's hard to move forward if it's just a blank canvas or a black hole. And that's where people get stuck. So it's about throwing as much color on that blank canvas and shining a light into that black hole of things you can do and what the future might look like, so that you can rebuild your life, just like you've done, Emma Jane, and Karen's done, and I've done. It is possible. And it's about showing people how, so they can take their power back and start to get back in the driving seat of their life. And that changes the momentum and enables them to start to feel good again. And
you work with men and women, yes?
Yeah, I work with men and women from all over the world. I mean, that's the beauty now of Zoom video, that you can jump on and have clients around the world. So yeah, men and women, because it's the same. We all go through the same thing. Yes. And I have a lot recently. You were talking about same-sex breakups. I've got a lot more same-sex people coming through than I ever had before. And I'm not really sure why, to be honest. But I think the fact that divorce has been on the front page of every newspaper, that domestic abuse is now more widely spoken about, that it is now frontline news. I mean, it is something that is being discussed, whereas it was always something in the background. And as the patron of the Dash charity, which is a domestic abuse charity that Karen also works for, we've seen a massive increase in people reaching out to the charity for support and help. And I think the fact that it's now, you're able to talk about it, people are realizing it's time to make a change, time to get out, things are changing. So, if things are unhealthy, I think the pandemic has shone a light on the fact that, it's the small things that matter, and we're changing our priorities in life and not settling for less anymore.
Okay, as you touched on the Dash charity, Karen, let's talk about that. The work that you do with the Dash charity, is that something that you fell into because of your own personal situation?
Oh, yeah. So I've been there for 14 years now. So I'm literally part of the furniture. So I started as a volunteer initially because I just recognised that there must have been other people going through similar situations to myself, and then trained as an IDVA, an independent domestic violence advocate. So for a lot of the time that I've been at Dash, I supported people that were in very high risk and very complex situations, and have worked with the police and social care and criminal courts, civil courts, etc. And I spend a lot of my time training professionals on domestic abuse and how to respond and how to understand what that is like when you are going through it. So at the moment, the Dash charity are just involved with a Safe Lives project with the Thames Valley Police. So we are training police officers on how to respond when they go out to 999 calls and to make sure that they really understand coercive control. I'm just about to start training hairdressers and beauty therapists as part of the hashtag Cut It Out campaign that's rolling out across the Thames Valley. So that's quite exciting, because we have to find more ways to reach out to people, and we need to improve the response that we give to victims of domestic abuse, because we know that a lot of people don't call the police. Only about 30% of police of people will actually pick up the phone and call 999. So we need to have other ways to reach out to them and to encourage them to make those disclosures. And, you know, we all know how excited we were coming out of this lockdown to get back to the hairdressers and get the eyebrows done and everything. And our hairdressers are literally like our therapists, and we tell them lots of things about our personal lives. So it's really important that they feel confident in how to respond, and they don't have to get involved in all the nitty gritty, but they need to know how to ask some very subtle questions and how to signpost people to the right help. So very excited about rolling that out this year.
That's great. I think also we have to say that not all divorce is born from domestic abuse either, is it? You know, people do grow apart, they do fall out of love. But the great work that you're doing obviously is helping a lot of people. So well done, Karen, for doing that. Would you say, and this is to either of you now, would you always have an emotional attachment to the person you've divorced? Sara?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think it varies for different people. I think, you know, you've had a lot of life experiences with this person, and emotional attachment could be strong, weak, good or bad, you know. Yes. So I think over time it definitely diminishes. And I think, you know, if you think back to your first love, the first time you fell in love, maybe you're a teenager, maybe you're in your 20s, where you actually fell, you know, head over heels in love with that person. And then at some point along the road, you broke up from them. And looking back now, you may still think fondly about them, even though at the time they hurt you, but you may still think, gosh, you know, that was an amazing journey. And so you can look back without the pain, without the angst, without maybe the hatred or the hurt, and just look back and see, you know, yeah, it was an experience. It was a learning experience that's made me who I am. And I think when you start to move on from your divorce, and that, you know, I see this a lot in my business, because turning something that was actually one of the worst moments in your life into something that can actually be one of the best learning experiences you've had, that goes on to create you feeling stronger, more empowered, being more aware of yourself, your behaviors, and actually maybe even turning that into something that can help other people, as I did and Karen does. And, you know, I train people to become breakup and divorce coaches, and we've got about 150 coaches in our community learning how to help other people. And I would say 98% of people that are training with me have been through a really difficult divorce, and they've learned so much from that personal journey about how to cope and how good things can be when you get out the other side, that they want to use that to help other people. So that emotional attachment with their ex can become a very empowering one, and one that helps them, you know, be a better parent, you know, be a better role model for their kids, to show them, look, sometimes the wheels fall off in life. Sometimes we don't get that happy fairy tale ending that we wanted, but, you know, things can still be good, you know. And teaching your kids how to cope as you're going through a divorce, and showing them, look, yes, mummy, daddy is sad right now, but look, here's 3 things I can do that are going to cheer me up. Let's put on some happy music. Let's do star jumps. Let's start laughing. Let's, you know, whatever it is that works, and depending on your age of your kids, obviously. But actually, if you can show them that, yes, it's okay to have that negative emotion, you're not going to stuff it down or hide it away, as long as you're not obviously uncontrollably sobbing in front of your child, and then show them how to pull themselves out of that, then that's a tool that they'll learn at a very young age, and can be a very, very valuable life lesson. So the breakup and the attachment with your ex can actually be something that helps both you and your children as you go through the rest of your lives.
Yeah, and you just touched on, you know, previous relationships as we're growing up in our teens, 20s, 30s. You know, we've all had significant relationships that have broken down before we've got married, and they are a fond memory. They become a fond memory. But it seems that the divorce situation, and maybe it's because it's legal and it's paperwork and it's a bit more of a process, the attachment seems so much stronger for so many people. And it needn't be, because actually, like you said, it wasn't all bad to start, right? There were some good things there. And even though it hasn't worked out, take the good things away from that, and learn from the bad things, because those are the things that are going to have to change. Sara, you say there is life after a breakup of divorce, and it's a golden opportunity to redesign your life just the way you want it. Just because it's tough now doesn't mean you can't feel happy again. And I love that. I mean, that should be bottled and sent to everybody around the world, because this is really important. So many people face divorce with those eyes of my life's over. There's difficulties all around me. And yeah, of course, there's people with difficulties, financial difficulties. But this, again, doesn't need to be why you stay, because there is life after breakup. There is a lot of support out there for you. And we should not be afraid of this process, whatever the reasons are behind it, because there is life after breakup. And I love that it's a golden opportunity to redesign your life. And that is a really strong statement there. Use this time to improve what you've got, not make it worse.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think you have a choice. You know, you can come out of a breakup and it can be the grey cloud that then follows you around for the rest of your life. It can be. And that's, as an adult, that's your choice. But there is another choice. But just to say, it's completely normal to feel like that the world is ending, that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And quite often people will get focused on the financial settlement and battling out for what that is, and forget that that's the financial settlement, whatever it is at the end of that process, is how it is right then. But it doesn't mean they can't change the financial situation afterwards. It may not be easy, but there's definitely ways you can create another income stream. You know, there's lots of opportunities now, you know, with you know, everyone being on the internet and video coaching, things are a lot easier to get a new business off the ground, and a lot less cost, because you don't need a big office. So there are things you can do. So I think, you know, it is important to realize that there is a choice. And I know that you may not be able to know the how at this point, and that's okay, because you don't have the how when you're going through the overwhelm. But it's about having that faith that it will be okay, and taking a small step every day to move you in the right direction, and not worry if a couple of days you take 2 steps back, because that's normal too, and not beating yourself up, and just having that faith that you will get there. And if you can get some guidance from somebody that has got there and can guide you through that. I mean, obviously Karen's got a book, I've got 2 books. You know, there is a lot of information out there to help you pull yourself back on track and get yourself through it. And yeah, it is a golden opportunity that our married friends don't have, to jump off that treadmill of life, that daily routine, and go, what isn't working in my life? What do I want less of? And what do I want more of? Who do I never want to have in my life anymore, or have less of? And who do I want to see more of? You know, and writing your breakup bucket list of all the things you can do now that you could never have done with your ex. Maybe they didn't like those friends, they didn't want to spend time with them, or maybe they didn't like to go to the places you wanted to go, or maybe they didn't like you wearing leather trousers or blue nail polish. Whatever it is, you know, you can start to reclaim that. So there's, you know, if you can focus on those things, you'll start to get your sparkle back, and that's when the momentum starts.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So if you've just joined us here on River Radio and you want to know more about the shows, then visit our website, www.river.radio. We are the voice of the Thames Valley. We are streaming 24/7. So come and join us, be part of our family. Great music, conversation and news. And if you want to know more about my work here, on Wednesdays, I have the Power Hour at 1 o'clock. And on a Monday, I do the Wellbeing Show at 11 o'clock. No subject is taboo for me. I will pick up on anything. So if you want to get in touch, email me, ej@river.radio. Let's make a difference to the people who are struggling in silence. Okay, so Sara was mentioning books. Karen and Sara, obviously my guests today, talking about divorce. They've both written books. Let's come to you, Karen, because you've just got a book out now, which has recently been published. So now you're a published author. How does that feel?
I know, it was very exciting, and the feedback and the reviews have been amazing. I'm just so overwhelmed actually by the feedback that I've received from my clients, from professionals as well, who are saying that they are going to use it within their work to help the families that they are supporting. It's all just really, really positive. So, it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I actually had a client the other day saying that when she was going through her breakup from an abusive relationship, she used to go into bookshops searching for books like mine, and she wished that she'd had that book available to her. So I'm very happy with it.
So I'm looking at it on Amazon right now. It is $9.99 and it's Recognition to Recovery with Karen Kipping. Look at that. Lots, all 5 stars as well. How to Leave Your Abusive Ex Behind for Good. So you very much focus on domestic abuse side of separation, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's based on your own personal story.
It is, and in the book I share lots of real life examples that I've collated over the years, because very often when you're in that kind of relationship, you hear things and you feel that they are unique to your experience. You know, you hear the things that your partner or your ex-partner is saying to you, and you believe them, and you take it very personally, and there's a lot of self-doubt there. But when you read the book, and I share some of those examples, as you read it, you can think, oh, well, I've heard that one before, but then that other person has heard that. So, you know, maybe that's something that people that are in similar relationships to me are experiencing. So it makes you feel less alone in your experience. And in the book, there's lots of positive examples to give you that hope and that inspiration that actually you don't have to accept this. You know, you can get through it. It is difficult. It is a process. Like Sara was saying, it is a learning process and a grieving process very often, but you can get through it and you can come out the other side and you can rediscover yourself and be a stronger, happier, more confident person at the end of it. Nobody would wish an abusive relationship on anybody, but if you are going through it, you can get out of it.
And of course, with the work that you're doing and the book that you're writing, and we touched on it earlier, trauma bonding is a real thing and something that will be causing a huge effect and a difficult problem for many abusive relationships. And again, you know, we must also stress that divorce isn't always born from abusive relationships. This is your personal experience, and it's helping so many people, because domestic abuse, obviously, as we know, the stats are going higher and higher. So great work that you're doing there, Karen. Now look who's rolled in. Here he
rolled
is.
in.
Mikey B.
Rolled in.
Mikey B, our local resident poet. Here he is with us on this show. So we're talking about divorce today, Mike. And we've been going all around the houses with all these conversations about the children, the partners, the difficulties around domestic abuse as well. Such a big conversation.
Yeah, I don't suppose many people have been saved the challenge of divorce. My parents divorced when I was going through my school qualifications. It had a huge impact, especially on my sister as well, massively. She went from predictions of good results to very, very little. And then I swore it wouldn't happen to me. And then it did. And that sort of still rankles with me today, that I thought I could do something and I didn't. I've come to terms with it. I've come to terms with why. I didn't want to feel it was part of a repeat process that because my parents divorced, I would divorce. But I have a brother and a sister, and my sister also is divorced. My brother is not divorced, but equally, he's in the most unhappy relationship. Spin it how you will.
Yes, and of course, you know, lots of parents who've divorced, the children will not want to live that life because they've seen and heard and done lots of things that they don't want to repeat. But of course, that's not always the way, and that's okay as well. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a failure, and we must encourage people not to just stay in that marriage because their parents didn't.
Yeah, I actually now a firm believer in that if you're in a relationship that's not working, then you're not going to make just yourself unhappy and your partner happy, but everyone who's attached to it will know and will realize, and it has an impact on them. And the type of, we make a judgment and we say, if someone can stay happily married or someone can stay married from beginning to end, we applaud them and say that is the standard that we expect. But of course, I don't believe that anymore. I feel that as you change throughout life, that potentially you can have several big relationships. Complication is all the other bits that come with it, especially the children.
And of course, we know divorce is a legal separation, but also it is separating or dissociating from something else, typically with an undesirable effect. So, you know, whilst we're talking about it being a legal separation with a person. There's lots of relationships that need to divorce as well.
You told me the same thing, that if you're surrounded by people with negativity, get them out of your life, divorce them from your life.
Yes.
And that is a positive statement, it's a positive action. And it's sometimes actually really hard for people to make that decision. And actually that decision is, you know, you carry on and you carry on and you carry on. When in reality, if you'd made the decision a while ago, it would have been better for everyone. It's a hard thing to do.
Put people around you that you want in your life, people that make you feel better, make you feel good emotionally, mentally and physically. You know, we don't need to be surrounded with partners and friends and even to a degree some family who make people feel bad. It's okay. You know, you can remove these people with kindness and love, and, you know, let's take that message forward, whoever you are, whether it's your partner, your friend, your family member. It's okay to separate, Sara, isn't it?
Absolutely. And quite often getting divorced is the time to detox some of those people out of your life that you don't want, you know, as well as detox your whole life. You know, there's so many things you can do to take back your control and move on. And some of that is looking at what is acceptable in your life, you know, reevaluating your boundaries of what is acceptable behavior for you. What kind of people do you want around you? Like you said, having good people in your life will pull you up and make you feel better. If you've got people that are negative, it will drain you. I call them energy vampires. We all know what they're like. You walk into a room and you spend time with this person, and then afterwards you feel less than, or you feel like your self-worth is taken a bit of a hit. And it's about recognizing that consciously, because we can't always get rid of these people from our lives. Maybe they're part of a family system, maybe they're someone you work with, but it's about understanding consciously who the negative people are in your world and protecting yourself about that. And I think another really important thing to bear in mind when you're coming out of a breakup, whether it's a breakup or a divorce, you have to look back and learn the lessons, because life has a funny way of teaching you those lessons over and over again until you bank them. So looking back and thinking, you know, what have I learned from this? What kind of person do I need to be with in the future? Not just what you want, because we all know what we want, you know, tall, dark, handsome, short, blonde, blue eyes. That's the easy bit. But looking back and thinking, actually, I need someone who is emotionally intelligent, or someone that can, you know, support me emotionally, or whatever it is that is honest, you know, whatever it is that you've learned from the past, because otherwise you'll start to keep attracting the same partner to you, the same type of person. And you may have learned that instinctively from watching your parents' relationships and thinking, well, that's what I know, so I'm going to attract that kind of partner. But maybe you don't need that. Maybe that's not going to be successful for you going forward. So it's important to reevaluate that, learn the lessons so you don't keep on making the same mistakes.
And Karen says, get advice on all of your options. It won't be an easy ride, but it will be worth it. You know, again, really powerful statement there. And she also says, Karen, you said your one top tip is future. Remember why you were doing this. Keep that in mind and keep focused on moving forwards, because that's hard, isn't it? To keep moving forwards when you've got, and in this instance of the work that you're doing, you've got trauma bonding pulling you back. You've got that emotional attachment, that very difficult feeling of guilt when someone, you know, it's very easy for your abusive partner to make you feel guilty. So that's why people will stay in the end.
Yeah. And when you've got children together, particularly, you know, even after the divorce is finished, you still have to communicate with your controlling ex-partner or your abusive ex-partner. And that can be really difficult, and it can be very draining, and it can feel very negative. And you can just feel like, God, this is never going to end. It's never going to stop. But it will stop. And what you can do, like Sara said, is you can learn from the past. They're quite predictable. So you can start to be more proactive than reactive and take some of that control back, put good boundaries in place, learn some really simple strategies that will minimize the impact of your ex's behavior on your life, and start to shift your focus towards creating a happier future. So you can really start moving forward and creating that life that you want. You know, you went through all of this process and all of these difficult times. You want to come out of it with something. You know, you have to focus on that, creating the happier times ahead. And, you know, you can do things like creating a mood board, doing a bucket list, and really getting excited about some of the things that can happen now. And that keeps you motivated, that keeps you focused. And if you get support through that process, it can be much easier. It can still seem like 2 steps forward, 1 step back sometimes, but the trick is to not stop, to keep going.
And that's not easy. Okay. All right. Well, Michael Bolton, our resident poet, my poet in my pocket is here. Divorce. How's this subject been for you this time?
Fortunately, you picked a subject I have some experience on, if that's the right way to turn it. And just before I start, just a comment on Sarah. You're quite right. You should learn to not make the same mistakes again. So it's only taken 3, not marriages, but relationships. And now time on my own has been really good to reflect on who I am and what I want. So this is called Divorce, not me. I remember when my parents divorced, I said to myself, not me. I'm not going to make the same mistakes. I'll make it work, you'll see. But sadly, it was not meant to be. I'm a separation statistic now. I tried my best, I really did. I look back and wonder how. But let me ponder on another thought. What if we had stayed as one? The arguments, the stress and pain. Perhaps it was best when done. Of course, there are consequences, split possessions and guilt. And I know it affects the children. Family balance on the tilt. So in the world we have created, do we expect too much? How can we expect to stay together? Has marriage lost its touch? Still might try again though.
Really lovely. What a, you know, we're just coming up for the last few minutes. What a lovely end to the show. And, you know, Mike's incorporated everything that we've been talking about there beautifully. Thank you very much, Mike. Lovely poem. You know, so this is a conversation I think we need to have again. I don't think this is a one-off show. I think this is, again, something that we should factor in throughout our year because people need help. And there is so many complexities there, and you know the work that you're both doing, and also the fact that, you know, let's keep on with this conversation about getting domestic abuse people in the legal professions much more aware and trained up on it, because with all of these subjects, all of these abusive subjects, people aren't knowing enough. They're just going for cash and wins, and we need more understanding. Okay, right then, Karen, what is your website? How can people contact you?
So it's really simple, just KarenKippingCoaching.com.
Oh, we like a simple website. KarenKippingCoaching.com.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Sara?
SaraDavison.com. Very
Lovely.
simple. And Sara Davison Divorce Coach on Instagram and all social media, yeah.
So KarenKippingCoaching.com, SaraDavison.com. And Michael, how can people find you and your website and your poetry?
Yeah, so sorry, it's Sara, not Sarah. I got that wrong. Never mind. I've written a book called The Virus Poems. You go to theviruspoems.com, or you can find me on the Power Hour or Wellbeing Show with Emma Jane, because I do have Poet in a Pocket. And you can find me on all other sources out there as well.
Thank you. Okay, so that's viruspoems.com. And of course, Mike is also with me every Monday at 11 o'clock. Well, at 11:30 every Monday and at 1:30 every Wednesday. So you can catch him here at the end of each show. Okay, one word, ladies and gentlemen. One word. I'm going to start with mine. Mine's balance. Everyone knows it. Be physically, mentally, and emotionally aligned to be the best you. So my word is balance. One word, Karen, before we go off air.
Future.
Future.
So yeah, just focus on creating that happier future.
Thank you. Sara, your one word.
Howard, taking back your control, redesigning your life. Perfect.
Love that. And Michael, one word from you.
Be truthful.
Ah, we like that. Truthful, authentic, be you. Okay, so I'm Emma Jane Taylor. This is Power Hour on River Radio. Today we've been talking about divorce with Sara Davison, Karen Kipping, and of course my poet in my pocket, Michael Bolton. If you've been affected by anything in today's show, please do email me, ej@river.radio, and I will support you in any way I can, or of course support you to my guest today. Stay with River Radio because we have some great music, conversation and community news to share. And don't forget to be you. You need to use your voice and remember that you do matter. I will see you next Wednesday here on River Radio for Power Hour. Oh, and don't forget, I'll be here Monday at 11 o'clock. Have a great week and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys.